what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about when we are referring to Caitlin Clark running the show. Caitlin Clark running the offense, being the innovator of offense, the distributor of offense for the Indiana Fever. This is exactly what we mean right here.
They told you the story already. You saw the headlines, heard the post-game interviews, maybe even watched the highlight reel. According to them, it was just another solid performance, another win, and another box score filled with numbers that don't ask questions. But what if the numbers were lying? Because behind the stats and sound bites, something much bigger happened, and almost no one is talking about it. This wasn't just a win, it was a statement. A quiet internal rebellion that flipped the power dynamic on its head. The kind of mid-game shift that doesn't come from a clipboard, it comes from a decision made by the players. In this video, we're going beyond the scoreboard. We're connecting the dots between a frustrated veteran's warning, a chaotic first half, and the moment a team took control of its own destiny. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about power, leadership, and the moment a rookie transformed into a general. Stay with us, because once you see what really happened, you won't look at this team the same way again.
Caitlin Clark, good Lord, what a game. 3 rebounds, 13 assists, 5 steals, a block shot, and 14 points.
The signs were there before tip-off, if you were paying attention. The Indiana Fever weren't just losing games, they were losing belief. From confused rotations to lifeless starts, this team wasn't underperforming, they were unraveling. And while the coaching staff kept pointing to effort and execution, players were starting to say something else entirely. Not loud, but clear. After one particularly rough loss, head coach Stephanie White made headlines. She didn't sugarcoat it. There was a lack of competitive fire, she said. I was disappointed. That might sound like a standard post-loss soundbite, but from a head coach, that's heavy. She wasn't critiquing X's and O's, she was questioning heart. And that's where things got interesting, because while Coach White was calling out the team, one of her players was calling for something else. Sophie Cunningham, known less for her stat line and more for her energy and fire, stepped up to the mic and without naming names made it clear that the team's current approach wasn't working. We're running out of time, she said. It's going to light a fire under our butts, so hopefully you're going to see that energy shift tomorrow. Now, on the surface, that sounds like classic athlete talk. But if you listen closely, it was more than that. This wasn't a motivational quote. This was a line in the sand, a warning, a challenge, maybe even a shot across the bow of the coaching staff. The Fever weren't just frustrated, they were divided, and the very next game would make that divide impossible to ignore. What Sophie Cunningham said before the game may have sounded like a cliche to casual listeners, but to those paying attention, it was anything but. We're running out of time. It's going to light a fire under our butts, so hopefully you're going to see that energy shift tomorrow. That line wasn't just frustration, it was strategy. Because if you know Sophie Cunningham, you know she doesn't waste words. She's not the type to talk just to fill air. She's one of the few emotional leaders on this roster, and when she speaks, teammates listen. But this time, so did the media. What she said wasn't just about effort, it was about change. And what she implied was even louder than what she said out loud. We are doing things the wrong way, and something's about to give. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Her message was pointed and public. In a locker room that had started to split between the old guard and a new identity forming around Caitlin Clark, this was Sophie stepping out of line on purpose. She lit the match, and everyone who heard it knew exactly what she meant. The way things were being run wasn't working anymore. That wasn't a motivational rally cry. That was a shot at the foundation itself. And whether she intended to or not, Sophie Cunningham just declared open season on the old system. The only question now was, who else felt the same way? If Sophie Cunningham lit the match, the first half against the Atlanta Dream poured gasoline on the floor. The opening 20 minutes weren't just ugly, they were exposing. Every flaw that had been whispered about in press conferences and fan forums was suddenly on full display for the world to see. The defensive scheme? Shredded. The offensive flow? Non-existent. The energy Coach White had been begging for? Still nowhere to be found. But nothing captured the collapse quite like Jordan, Canada. A player averaging 8.9 points per game exploded for 26 points in just 2 quarters. Let that sink in. She hit 6 threes. She danced through defensive rotations like they weren't even there. It was a clinic, not by Atlanta, but on everything the Fever were doing wrong. And here's what made it worse. The Fever weren't getting beat because of bad luck or elite execution. They were getting beat because of their own system. Caitlin Clark barely touched the ball. Movement was slow. The spacing was clogged. Offensively, the team looked like 5 strangers trying to read the same page of a book written in different languages. By halftime, the scoreboard said it all. Fever 40, Dream 45. Down by 5 at home. But the gap felt bigger than that. Because this wasn't about the score. It was about validation. The kind no coach wants. Cunningham's comments? Suddenly they weren't speculation. They were prophecy. The warning signs had been ignored. And now, under the lights and in front of a crowd, the system collapsed. And here's the part that matters most. The players knew it. You could see it in their faces walking to the locker room. Not just frustration, realization. That was 20 minutes of playing the right way, according to the coach. And it had blown up in their faces. Something had to change, but it wasn't going to come from the whiteboard. It had to come from somewhere deeper and someone bolder. There's no transcript, no leaked footage, no tell-all from the locker room. But sometimes silence says everything. When the Fever returned to the court after halftime, they weren't just playing harder. They were playing different. So different, in fact, that it couldn't possibly have come from the same blueprint. Gone was the rigid offense. Gone were the slow, predictable possessions. Gone was the system. Instead, Caitlin Clark had the ball on nearly every trip down the court. She wasn't just participating in the offense. She was the offense. And it didn't look improvised. It looked decided, like a pact had been made behind closed doors. This wasn't a tweak. It was a revolt. The Fever poured in 59 second-half points, flipping a 5-point deficit into a 17-point blowout win. But it wasn't the scoreline that told the story. It was how they did it. Clark was dictating pace, drawing defenders like a magnet, creating wide-open looks for her teammates. Sophie Cunningham, the one who sounded the alarm, suddenly came alive, draining clutch threes and crashing the boards. Kelsey Mitchell, who often disappears in a stagnant offense, looked unleashed. Aaliyah Boston reconnected with the game in a way fans hadn't seen in weeks. This wasn't random. It was coordinated, it was intentional, and it was player-led. Whatever happened in that locker room, it wasn't a motivational speech. It was a decision to stop waiting for the system to work and to take control of their own identity. And at the center of it all was Caitlin Clark. Not just running plays, but setting the tone. And the entire team followed. What changed wasn't just strategy. What changed was power. The third quarter didn't start with a bang. It started with a look. From Clark, from Cunningham, from Mitchell. A look that said, "We've got this now." And they did. The Fever didn't just play with more energy, they played with clarity. Every possession had purpose. Every pass meant something. The hesitation that had haunted this team for weeks? Gone. Caitlin Clark became the nucleus. Not because the coach told her to be, but because the players chose her to be. She orchestrated the offense like she was back at Iowa, pulling defenders with her eyes, stretching the floor, forcing Atlanta to scramble. She only finished with 9 assists, but that number lies, because her fingerprints were on nearly every basket. By empowering Clark to run the show, the rest of the team snapped into rhythm. Sophie Cunningham hit 4 second-half threes, feeding off the chaos Clark created. Kelsey Mitchell dropped a game-high 25, slicing through the defense that no longer knew where to look. Aaliyah Boston, finally in sync again, got clean touches and easy finishes. This wasn't a fluke or a hot streak. It was strategic rebellion in action. And the chemistry? Instant. The Fever recorded 27 assists on 35 made baskets, a jaw-dropping 77% assist rate. That's the statistical signature of a team no longer playing hero ball or rigid sets. but connected, selfless basketball. Even more shocking was the defense. Jordan Canada, who looked unstoppable in the first half, scored just 4 points after the break. Why? Because Clark didn't just lead the offense. She personally took the Canada assignment and shut it down. It was a statement, not just about effort, but about ownership. This was no longer a team waiting to be told what to do. This was a team that knew who it was, and finally how to play like it. Everything clicked. The passes got quicker. The rotations got sharper. The bench got louder. And the dream? They didn't just lose the lead. They lost all control. This wasn't a comeback. It was a coup. Everyone will talk about the scoring, the highlights, the threes, the assists. But that's not where this game was truly won. It was won on the other end of the floor, in the defensive trenches, where Caitlin Clark delivered her boldest statement yet. Let's rewind. Jordan Canada had 26 points in the first half. She was on pace for a career night, torching the Fever from deep, blowing past defenders and leaving broken coverage in her wake. It looked like Indiana had no answers, until Clark became the answer. Coming out of halftime, Caitlin Clark, the rookie point guard so often labeled as a defensive liability, called her own number. She took the Canada assignment, personally, and she shut it down. From 26 first-half points to just 4 in the second half. Let that sink in. That's not a small dip. That's not just regression. That is total neutralization. And it wasn't flashy. Clark didn't rack up steals or blocks. She just stayed attached, read the screens, moved her feet, and denied Canada every angle she had exploited earlier. This was leadership in its rawest form. Not the kind you see in press conferences, but the kind that changes the game without saying a word. Clark wasn't pointing fingers. She was setting the tone. And what happened next was a chain reaction. The rotations got tighter. The closeouts got faster. Help defense was crisp, timely, intentional. Because when your most watched, most scrutinized player starts locking in on defense, everyone follows. It's not about being perfect. It's about effort. And effort is contagious. For a team that had been accused by their own coach of lacking competitive fire, this was an emphatic response. They weren't just matching Atlanta's intensity, they were smothering it. The Fever turned the dream offense into a fog. What once looked like an inevitable explosion turned into rushed shots, broken plays, and confused stares. Atlanta didn't just run out of gas. They got outplayed, out-hustled, and out-led. And again, it all traces back to Clark. Not the playmaker, not the scorer, but the leader who decided, if nobody else is going to take her, I will. That decision changed the temperature of the game. That decision changed the culture on the floor. Because in that moment, Caitlin Clark wasn't just trying to win. She was showing her team how to win. You don't need insider footage of the locker room to know what happened at halftime. You just have to look at the numbers, because they tell the truth, even when the narrative tries to hide it. Let's start with the most glaring stat of all. 27 assists on 35 made field goals. That's a 77% assist rate. Not just good, but elite. That's the profile of a team playing connected, purposeful basketball. Not freelancing, not running ISO after ISO. This was ball movement with a mission. And who was at the center of it all? You already know. Caitlin Clark racked up 9 assists, but again, that number barely scratches the surface. She wasn't just passing, she was warping the defense, bending Atlanta's shape until the perfect opportunity cracked open. Every swing pass, every skip, every drive and kick, it all started with her vision. But here's where it gets even more revealing. In the second half alone, Clark posted a +118 plus-minus, a staggering figure in just 20 minutes of action. That means when she was on the court, the Fever outscored the Dream by 18 points. That's not a coincidence. That's a signal. What kind of signal? A system running through Clark works. It produces not just flashy plays, but results. It creates spacing. It empowers shooters. It turns chaos into rhythm. And the teammates responded accordingly. Kelsey Mitchell came alive in the flow, scoring a team-high 25 points. Sophie Cunningham dropped a 16-point, 10-rebound double-double, including 4 massive threes. Aaliyah Boston re-established chemistry with Clark, looking comfortable and dangerous once again. Suddenly, everyone looked like they belonged. Everyone looked like they knew their role. And that's the biggest shift of all. Before halftime, the Fever looked lost, reactive, scrambled, following a script that wasn't working. After halftime, they looked like they were writing their own. That's not just energy, that's structure. That's a group of players making an executive decision. We've tried it your way, now we're doing it ours. And the stats? They didn't just support the decision, they celebrated it. Victories usually secure a coach's footing. But this win, it might have done the opposite. Because when your team wins despite the system, not because of it, the spotlight doesn't shine brighter on the coach. It shifts away from them entirely. Let's be blunt. This second-half explosion wasn't a masterclass in coaching adjustments. It was a mutiny, and it worked. The offense finally clicked the moment the players stopped following the playbook and started following their instincts. Specifically, Caitlin Clark's instincts. That's not just a tactical shift. That's a power shift. And here's where the real tension starts. How does Coach Stephanie White walk back into that locker room and reassert control when the players just proved they can run the show without her? This isn't speculation for drama's sake. Fan forums, social media, and analysts are already circling this question like vultures. Is Stephanie White the right fit for this roster? Is her philosophy compatible with a generational talent like Clark, one who thrives in pace, space, and improvisation? Let's not forget, the same frustrations that Sophie Cunningham voiced, the ones that sparked this rebellion, have been simmering for weeks, and now the players have proof that their way works. So what happens next? Does the coach adapt her system to fit the